Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the issue of, it's two things. Mass migration of illiterate peasants to do burger flipping jobs in take-out food franchises and take-out food chains. And also the claim that's gone, numerous claims by the big chains, Chipotle and others, many others, where they're talking about they're really going back to the drawing board in terms of kitchen, and cooking and preparation, food prep organisation, in automating and introduce as many robots as they can, and AI and the whole 9 yards. And their aim is to eliminate even the cheap labour that they're supposedly getting as all these third world peasants come into the West, brought in by the globalists, with the blessing of many of the big corporations, especially the corporations that are get financed through BlackRock and State Street and those sort of guys who are also part of that globalist cabal. But there's quite a few issues here, and I'll try and reduce the complexity of it. But so mass migration is needed because no one's going to do the local people won't do those jobs in things like cleaners and take out food and aged care and that sort of stuff. So that's why mass migration is needed, because the local people just plain refuse to do those jobs. That, of course, is absolute utter nonsense. What's happened is we've got a centrally controlled economy that's increasingly becoming more centrally controlled, but under globalist supervision by the day. So these sort of jobs, such as flipping burgers and painting nails in beauty salons, all that sort of stuff, the gap between the cost of living and what those jobs pay has become wider and wider. And what's more, the pay of those jobs has been artificially suppressed. You also see it in things like, say, retail stores, that sort of thing. Now, this is why increasingly these jobs are filled by people that can barely speak English, and they're illiterate peasants in their own language and this sort of thing. But they're being given these jobs. But the reason they'd be given these jobs is because those wages are no longer livable, and the only way you can make those wages have them of any use is if you live communally. That's why these the black and brown migrants, many of whom are illegal in a lot of countries, that's why they live communally. That's why around in Sydney you get 20 people living in a 2-bedroom apartment, or 12 people living in a 1-bedroom apartment, or even a 5-bedroom house. You can have 25, 30 people living in a 5-bedroom house. On it goes. So the only way they can live is to live communally. Now, there are various scams used to bring these people in through labour hire firms. So, some dodgy, flaky labour hire firm will then bring out these third world peasants, and their income, as I've mentioned in other videos, their pay is packaged up in rent and food. So they get given meals at the takeout food place they work at. They're piled in 20 to a 2-bedroom apartment in an apartment that is owned by the same guy who owns the labour hire scam firm, and then they're put out to work in these takeout food shops, often for 6-7 days a week, 12-hour shifts, which you couldn't get a local person to do. Would be against industrial and employment law and so on. But some illiterate peasant from the third world, you can get away with that. So that's where a lot of it comes from. But even with these sort of things, other things that they're doing to, it's not so much that it is an issue that the job doesn't pay very well. That's a statement of the obvious. But it used to be those are the sort of jobs that high school kids and college kids did to make a bit of extra money and so on. You hardly ever see that anymore. You don't see the college kids. In the retail stores, it's not college kids. It's people that have just come out of low IQ, people that have come out of drug rehab. If I look at some of the local retail stores around. You look at the people working there. There's one woman who came out of long-term drug rehab, another woman who was been imprisoned on and off for theft, and another one that's on all sorts of drugs, otherwise she goes ballistic, and another one, and the list goes on of people who in a real world would struggle to find any employment. But anyway, the idea of people being chosen because of their, as in the bright young kids that would always have those jobs, they don't exist anymore. It's people who, in effect, are socially or even physically handicapped that are working in those jobs, and they pay the least amount of money per hour of any jobs going. Now, in spite of that, in spite of being able, but also I'll add something else here. Another thing that's been a huge change is people can get 15 minutes to half an hour notice that they need it, and 3 or 4 people can be called up. And if you're the first there, you get the 4-hour gig. But if you're not, they'll just send you home. Now, they can treat illiterate peasants like that, but they can't. It's much harder to treat a local person that way, which is another reason why why the trade unions aren't jumping up all over this in across the Western world is quite beyond me. They've obviously been told to not get involved. But in spite of that, there's various stories in the business press, again, Chipotle and so on, and they're talking tough about going to nuclear levels of automation and robotisation, and again AI. And so now I don't know whether they're just talking big and tough about that to gin up the stock price, or whether they're going to do it. But if that is the case, and I believe it is, then millions upon millions of jobs in the US will be made redundant, through this automation process, not simply in takeout food, but other areas as well. And so why are these millions upon millions of illiterate third world peasants needed if this is how things are going? Why give them citizenship? Give them short-term work visas, maybe. Perhaps that's it. If they genuinely are needed, and I don't believe they are. But if they are, then give them short-term work visas. But for God's sake, don't give them citizenship, and don't recognise any children that are born in the West as being citizens of that Western country. So these are some of the adjustments and changes needed that again, the incoming Trump administration is talking about in the United States, and I hope that spreads to all over the Western world. It needs to be. Now, looking at the issue of automation and AI generally, at the same time as jobs are being made redundant and are in the process of being made redundant through ever-increasing levels of AI and robots and automation and so on, at that same time, there's supposed to be vast hand-wringing all across the Western world about population decline. Women aren't having, enough babies and this sort of thing. Well, hold on a minute. If you're actively promoting and encouraging a reduction in jobs and the need for people to work at those jobs, why are you also concerned about that the population is not increasing? Why would you want an increasing population in an environment where there are fewer and fewer jobs, every day? And that's something that we need to sort of reconcile going forward across the Western world. If you look at the third world basket cases, they've got monumental unemployment as it is. In places like India, you can have 3,000 or more people applying for each job. So in the West, we don't have those sorts of numbers, of course, but if there are fewer jobs, and I think there are, the only increase in employment that's happening is in low-paid jobs. When it comes into skilled jobs, there's actually a decline in the number of jobs that a first world economy generates. And many of those, even in that category, many of those jobs are simply invented because of affirmative action and diversity, equity, inclusion. But we're even paying for that because the companies that are the most prominent in pushing DEI and affirmative action, they're the ones that are most heavily reliant on government contracts. So we pay a lot more taxes that the government takes in, and then they can artificially reward these companies for employing black lesbians in management. and we all pay for that ultimately. So where this is heading, I'm not sure, but population decline is obviously not a problem in such a scenario, and I don't know why it's argued it is, and why mass migration is needed, and why are these people, illiterate peasants, being offered citizenship or given citizenship or guarantees of long-term residency when in fact they've got no skills to offer other than the ability to flip burgers, and that's disappearing. You've been with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for listening.